Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the BitcoinMeister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to Today in Bitcoin. Today is February the 4th, 2017, and I'm really excited this afternoon to have a very special guest coming in from Vancouver, Canada. This was sort of unplanned. It's an honor to have him on the show on such short notice, and I hope all of you will be very excited about Jayant Bhandari. You've probably heard me mention him on this show before. I love the way he just straight talks about India and money and the world and politics in general. We have a similar philosophy toward, I guess, money and politics and freedom. And I think a lot of you will agree with him. And I know a lot of you know him and are familiar with him. I will give links to his pertinent links below. It's jayantbhandari.com. Jayant, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great, Adam, and thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, as you know, this is a Bitcoin show, but you are into a lot of other things. So why don't you give your background to everyone, so for the people who aren't familiar with you, they get the hang of what you're about.
So, Adam, I do consulting work on junior mining industry. I analyze these junior mining companies and I advise my institutional clients on investing in these companies. Apart from that, I spend a fair bit of my time writing on economics and cultures and societies. I travel around the world. This is one of my hobbies. I try to meet people. I want to understand local cultures, and I write a lot about different countries, their economies. And more recently, Adam, I have been writing a lot about India for the last 2 or 3 months. But so I do all these things, writing and
well, yes. So Jayant he might remind you guys a lot of someone who else was just on this show, Doug Casey. But again, we're going to talk about India and we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and the stuff you have written about India is just very intriguing, and it's I guess it can be polarizing in some people's eyes, but I just find it so interesting because we all hear a lot, especially in the Bitcoin world, about the potential of India. So tell us what's going on in terms of money. And we all hear about the cash shortages in India and the problems in India. So tell us what's going on in India, and then what you see maybe for Bitcoin and its future in India.
So, Adam, on the 8th of November 2016, Prime Minister Modi came on the television and he made an announcement which meant that 86 to 88% of monetary value of currency in circulation was suddenly overnight illegal, which meant that the paper that you had in your pockets the next morning were valueless unless you could go to a bank and deposit that currency into your bank accounts. The only problem was that lineups were massive, and it was almost impossible to get your cash out of the bank. So you could still deposit your cash, but could not take anything out, except for $20, $30, $50 kind of currency bills. So life has been extremely difficult for Indians over the last 3 months now, and this has continued. The economy is crashing. India is becoming a police state, Adam. A lot of that, what you hear in the international media about enormous economic growth of India, is fake. It's a myth. It's not the truth. People associate democracy with a lot of virtues and good things to do with a society. India is a totalitarian police state. It's a banana republic. And that's where it's increasingly heading towards on a day-to-day basis.
Wow, that is amazing. So there's a lot of confusion in India. There's a lot of poor people in India. There is like a top 5% there, some intelligent people that want to get their money out of the country, that realize what's going on. So can you say, are people trying to get their money out of the country? Who's trying to get their money out of the country? And is there panic? What's going on?
So, Adam, you meet a lot of Indians in the US, and the reason is that the best people from India leave the country, they move to the United States, Canada, Dubai, Singapore, or Hong Kong, and Australia. India is a very wretched, diseased, and poor place. On a per capita basis, India is more poor than an average African is. But again, as you said, those 4 or 5 or 10% of Indians who have wealth in that country are increasingly becoming extremely scared about the wealth that they have, because the government is a government, it's a police state, and people are extremely worried about what they own, because there is no rule of law. Judiciary goes along with what the prime minister wants it to do, which means that if the prime minister wants to expropriate your wealth, he can, which has meant that in the last 2 or 3 months, these savers have increasingly started to think in terms of moving their money outside the country. They are opening bank lockers outside the country to store their gold. They're trying to open bank accounts. It's extremely difficult process. And also remember, Adam, that historically, Hawala has been a big thing for people in the Middle East and in South Asia, because the governments have historically made it extremely difficult for these people to move their money abroad. And that's where I think Bitcoin has a huge role to play as an alternative Hawala. And I think maybe Hawala people are using Bitcoins already.
And this is very intriguing that Hawala people might already be using Bitcoin. I mean, it's exciting to me. Now, can you explain? Some of our viewers don't know what Hawala is, but it's like a non-technical version of Bitcoin almost. Explain to them what Hawala is.
So Hawala is a traditional non-formal banking system in which you move your money from one jurisdiction to another without the formal banking process. What happens is that you give certain amount of cash to a local person in your city, and you ask that cash to be converted into some other currency in a different jurisdiction and to be deposited or handed over to another person in that different jurisdiction. And this is what Hawala people do. They are a network of people around the world who enable this international transaction.
Yes, yes. So it's a trusted network already of people sending money. And so they could incorporate Bitcoin into it, or Bitcoin could almost replace it on a certain level. And I think this is really interesting because you don't see much mention on the internet of Hawala and Bitcoin right now, but maybe we're going to start hearing more about this. So when you mention that to me, it's exciting to me. So when you were in India, you did hear some mention of Bitcoin, didn't you? And that there was a 20% premium, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So people are looking at these issues. Bitcoin was trading at 20-30% premium in the market, which is a clear signal that Indians are trying their best to protect their wealth, and they're trying to move their money outside the country. Now, you won't hear much about this in the international media, because a lot of this people want to keep private, and it might even be not fully legal. You don't even understand the legalities of legal situation in a country like India, where just about everything is illegal, and for just about everything you have to pay a bribe. So people want to keep these things as private as possible.
Yes, I think this is an incredibly important point he just made there, is that Bitcoin, if it starts to grow in India, it's not like the people are going to start talking about it out on the street and advertising it around. It'll be an underground type of thing, because you gave me examples. People have gone to prison for much lesser things, and they don't even know what the punishment might be for doing something like this, correct?
Now, Adam, this is a big myth in the international space. People think India is this big democracy where rule of law works. The reality is completely different. It's a wretched, diseased country with no rule of law. Now, if you have $1 million lawyers, yes, rule of law might work for you, but there is no rule of law in that country. And a bureaucrat asks for a bribe for just about everything. In my 49 years of life, Adam, I have yet to meet a public servant in India who does not ask for a bribe.
Unbelievable. I think people have to try to grasp that concept right there, because I mean, many people watching this are like, bribes. I mean, I only read about that, see that in movies and stuff, but this is real life we're talking here, and this is when government has become totally crazy. I mean, authoritarian, etc. It's we won't get into all that stuff. But speaking of government, monopolization of money is something that you brought up to me. Decentralization of money. This is what intrigues you, I guess, about Bitcoin, correct?
Well, Adam, this fiat currency central banking system is an extraordinarily scary system. The paper currency that you own has no inherent value. And as Indians recently experienced, the value underpinning that paper currency is nothing. It's regulatory edicts. Overnight, through a regulatory edict, Indian Prime Minister made all these paper currency valueless. He made them toilet papers. How do you deal with a situation like this? How can you leave your wealth, the key to your wealth, in the hands of a single person, however good he might be? This monopoly on money is probably the worst thing humanity has today.
Yeah, that is, I mean, it explains a lot of what's going on in the world. Now, talking about diversification of your money, obviously you know a lot about precious metals, gold, silver, et cetera, et cetera. You seem to be open to Bitcoin, though. Do you think that precious metals and Bitcoin can go hand in hand, that the two communities can get along and intertwine with each other?
Well, you know, Adam, I wish somehow Bitcoin could be backed by gold or something. If something backed Bitcoin, it would truly bring a huge amount of interest in Bitcoin. The technology is great. The blockchain technology is amazing. It allows you to transact with people who you don't know about. It allows you to move your money around the world. So backing it with gold would be or something else would be an amazing thing to do for Bitcoin.
Okay, that's an interesting combination right there. I mean, you're thinking about the two at the same time. That is good. I want to go back to India for a second. In the past, I think you've said that the people there don't think much outside of India. They fear the international world, or they fear internationalization. And I can see this as being something that slows them down to getting interested into Bitcoin. What's your opinion on that attitude of the Indian people? Do they fear? Are they becoming more accepting of internationalization? Or?
Well, it will always be that top 4, 5, 10% of the population. India, Adam, is an extremely irrational society. It has been like this for millennia, and it will continue to be like that. British came to India and they tried to infuse the concept of reason in that society, and it failed. So don't expect too much from all the Indians, but any internationalization, any wealth creation must come from these 5 or 10% of the population of the country, which is a huge number by itself, though. That would still be about 20, 25, 250, as much as the population, 10, 20 million, 200 million people, actually. That's what 10, 20% of India's population would be.
Yeah, I think it's very important to point out. Well, first of all, your point about the top 4 or 5% of a country being the ones that understand finance, that'll be able to grasp something like Bitcoin. This is something very important to remember, and something I never really thought of before our conversations, is that a lot of us, and I'm guilty of this, I say, well, we got to get people on the ground in Mozambique and like get the people using the money and using the Bitcoin, knowing Bitcoin. But it's much more efficient to find the top 4 or 5% people in the country who already deal with finance and say, you're the finance leaders here, you're the thought leaders here. Let's get you on the Bitcoin. And I don't think anyone's really taking that approach right now in the Bitcoin world. So you've really opened my mind today about that. So I thank you. I thank you a lot. I want you to also just to go over the sheer numbers in India of the people there, how it will be the most populous nation on earth, I think, quite soon, right? It will overtake China. And just when we're talking about top 1% there, we're talking about a huge population. So even if only 1% of the people in India started thinking about Bitcoin, oh my God, it would help Bitcoin a lot. So go over the sheer size of India.
So more than 1 out of 6 people on this planet is an Indian. India's population is 1.35 billion people, and it increases by about million people every year, which means that India adds to its population of Australia every 14 or 16 months. That's the size of that country in terms of population.
I mean, that's just the growth rate. The growth rate is incredible. I mean, there's numbers. People think about that. Think about that for a second. It's amazing. I guess a little off topic. We were talking about travel before we got on air, and I think something that'll be interesting to people is, I mean, people were intrigued by Doug Casey saying, young people, get on the ground, go to these African nations. There's so much going on. And you take a little bit of a different approach, I think. I think you see a huge potential in the Western nations. Now talk about that, but also talk about what you experienced when you were just in the Congo. You were recently in the Congo, correct?
That's right. Adam, I take a different approach. I mean, I love Doug Casey. He's my philosophical mentor. However, to make money, my interest would be more in looking at Western countries. Western countries are organized countries. That is where you can actually make money. Even today, for a hardworking person, you can make a lot of money in the Western countries. So that's where I mostly focus on. Yes, I was in Congo recently, and Congo is a lawless place. The size of DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, is similar to the size of Western Europe. It's a massive country with virtually no roads, no infrastructure, no governance. I was for a week in Goma, which is the lawless part of Congo, where hundreds of thousands of people are probably still getting killed every year. When women get raped, they don't just get raped, their bodies also get mutilated. When you walk around the town of Goma, you see women with no noses, just holes in their faces, or amputated people, a lot of kids with no legs. It's an extremely difficult place, Congo. A lot of the world, Adam, is actually like that. And that is why I think, personally, I have a preference for Western countries, because a lot outside the West is extremely backward and dangerous, even today.
Wow, these are great points to bring up, and that is scary what you saw in Congo. But it's good to hear, what's really going on there, or what a Westerner witnessed there. And I'm sure there are a lot of people now, that you can go the route of Africa, the rough route, but it involves, if you're going to be successful there, from what you've told me, it does involve bribing people and such, or getting into that situation, which a lot of people aren't comfortable. In the Western world, at least, it's straightforward. So again, I guess maybe explain to the audience how corrupt the governments are. I mean, how you do business in a third world country.
Well, firstly, you have to bribe people in these countries all the time and on every occasion. The problem is not just about bribing, because if bribing could solve your problems, everyone would be bribing. The problem is that these people also do not honor their contracts and their commitments, which means that you have to be really intelligent about how you pay your bribes. Otherwise, you would have given the money, but your work will still not get done. So this is not just about corruption. It's a spiritual and psychological corruption among these people. And it's extremely difficult to make money out of these societies.
Wow. Wow. Well, this has been very eye-opening, I'm sure, to a lot of Bitcoin people out there who want Bitcoin to get into some of these developing nations, but at the same time just want Bitcoin to spread across the whole world. So you've got a different perspective here. Maybe we should be focusing on Western nations here. Maybe we should be focusing on the top 1% in these developing worlds. And there's you pick and choose who you target here, Bitcoin people. So I just love your perspective. I love how straightforward and honest you are, and I really thank you for being on the show. And I hope you can be on the show again in the future, because I think we're going to get some interesting feedback. And people, please leave comments below and check out Jayant's site, because you just get a unique perspective that you don't read about in many different places. Jayant, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave? Any thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience? Anything?
Well, again, I think things like gold and Bitcoin are more useful, in my view, for the poorest people of the poor countries, because these are the countries with no institutions. And these are the countries where wealth generators and savers feel very unprotected. And that's where I think interest in gold and in Bitcoins or other ways to preserve their wealth would come from.
All right. I think this has been a great time. And Jayant, I thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Adam.
All right, everyone. Well, that concludes this show. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video. Please check out the notes section below. I'm going to update it in a couple seconds. Thanks a lot again, Jayant Bhandari. Goodbye, everyone. I'll have another show later in the day, possibly, definitely one tomorrow. Talk to you later. See ya.